The EU is willing to offer Keir Starmer a new deal on Brexit, the Irish Prime Minister has said. I'm going to read into this more from The Independent, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an article from The Independent with the headline that the EU is willing to offer Keir Starmer a new deal on Brexit, the Irish PM has said. The Labour leader vows to improve the UK's relationship with the bloc, including closer ties on trading, research and defence, and pledging a better outcome than Boris Johnson's botched deal. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. Now, I know a lot of people are already jumping on the bandwagon that Labour are going to undo Brexit, they're going to rejoin the EU, and they're going to rejoin the single market and customs union. Jonathan Reynolds, business secretary, said on Sunday, when he was doing a couple of the media rounds, stated that that's not the intention of this Labour government. Now, is it entirely possible that he's flat out lying and their position could change in 5 years' time? It is entirely possible. But the UK is not ready to have that conversation, even though the majority know that being outside the EU is making us worse off, and many of us are suffering as a consequence of that. For example, the lack of funding that we used to get from the EU when it came to and many of the councils used to got many schemes and whatnot, from the EU. We don't have them anymore. There's hundreds of examples out there. But what this is about, guys, this is about obviously fixing the deal that Boris Johnson introduced. And the deal that Boris Johnson got was a crap deal. It was a crap deal, and people thought it was in the best interest of the UK, and it turned out it was not. Many businesses have suffered as a result of it. Many people now have to accept the reality that when they travel into Europe now, that they have to queue a bit longer. They have to get their passport stamped. And if you were someone who is bothered by that, well, that's the price we pay for so-called sovereignty. But I generally believe that Labour will look to try to improve the deal in some way, shape, or form. Now, it's very important to stress that in a few years' time, obviously, it's not a renegotiation of the deal that we have; it's a review. That's a very key point there. People need to understand that there's not going to be like a massive change on it straight away. There is going to be talks about trying to realign some of our standards that we have here in the UK, and we do have high standards. There's going to be trying to keep to those standards that the EU has, or set a higher standard than the EU has, because that's what we want. We want high standards here. We don't want lower standards. We want higher standards. And being outside the EU, the Conservative government were trying to lower our standards as a result of us being outside the EU. What the Labour government wants to do is to put us back on the same standards. That's the intention that they want to do. And there are some deals, especially on defence, research, defence, research, trading, those kind of things. I'm pretty sure everyone would want better trading deals for businesses in the UK. I'm sure people would are more than happy for us to have better cooperation when it comes to defence, better cooperation when it comes to research, all these things. Why would you not want? I'm sure people would love to have an improvement when it comes to the amount of medicines that we are getting, because we are lacking in medicines. I'm sure people would love to have that issue go away so that everybody is able to get their medicines. I'm sure some of you would agree with me on that. So there are fundamental things that need to be changed, that is for sure. Now, this will take time, like many other things, but it is a positive step in the right direction. You don't have that hostility that the Conservatives had towards the EU as well, which I think is really good. That's not to say that there was hostilities under Rishi Sunak's government. There was that under Boris Johnson. But obviously, Rishi Sunak did the Windsor Framework, which I think was a positive step in relationships between between Britain and the EU. And there's definitely some positive signs here, and especially when the Irish Prime Minister says this, that definitely raises a few eyebrows. But obviously, just because the Irish Prime Minister is saying this doesn't mean that the rest of the 27 bloc of EU want to have a new deal with the UK. It's about the UK needs to offer something to the EU if they want to have a new deal down the road. It's something that the blog would want, and the cooperation to be there. But I'm sure conversations are not, or have probably already started, but it's just a case of what those conversations will be, and where we can both help and engage in a better relationship as well on better these things like it says there, trading, research, defence and whatever. So let's have a read and see what this says, guys. So the European Union is willing to offer Keir Starmer a new deal on post-Brexit issues, the Irish Prime Minister has indicated. Simon Harris said there was space to work more closely with the EU and Ireland, and it would be an ally in negotiations, any negotiations. His comments were welcomed by the new Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who said the UK should explore ways to improve trade relations with the bloc, but he ruled out any return of freedom of movement. Yeah, he obviously had to say that. Yeah, he obviously had to say that, whether you agree with it or not. On a visit to Edinburgh, Sir Keir Starmer said the work had already begun to build closer ties to the EU following Labour's landslide election victory. The PM said he wanted better trading and security relationships with Brussels as he vowed to rip up the botched deal struck by Boris Johnson. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy also travelled to Europe for talks with key players, with a promise that the UK would be a good neighbour after years of Brexit strife. Speaking to reporters in Edinburgh, Sir Keir said, "We intend to improve our relationship with the EU, and that means closer trading ties with the EU. It means closer ties in relation to research and development, and closer ties in relation to defence and security." Obviously, there are many discussions that had to be had and negotiations to be had. But I do not think we can get a much better deal than the botched deal that Boris Johnson saddled the UK with, Mr Reynolds told Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Removing some of those barriers to trade makes sense, adding, "We've talked about recognising each other's professional qualifications. Again, completely sensible, pragmatic. If you are in the creative industry and you're really suffering in your ability to move around the EU, these are practical things. But pressed on free movement, we're not open to free movement of people. That is not something that is part of the membership of the EU, and as I said, it is not. We're not revisiting that. No, we're not. He's saying we're not visiting that, but we have to remember that that's not something that we voted for either." He added that going forward, a relationship to Europe is not determined by the internal politics of the Conservative Party. It's very much in the national interest of the UK. We're not going to revisit those constitutional arguments, but of course, where there is a mutual interest in both the European Union and the UK to work together, that good faith has got to make sense. Yeah. One of his first acts in government, Sir Keir has held a telephone call with the Taoiseach and invited him to Downing Street on July 17th. Yes, the Irish Prime Minister, obviously, that would be a very good start, obviously. After there would be a willingness to renegotiate parts of the Brexit deal, Mr Harris said, "I do absolutely think there will be a fair hearing for any proposal that the British government or indeed the EU has about ironing out practical issues in terms of having a relationship that works." And he said that the Brexit had happened and the British people had made their decision. Well, yes, the British people had made their decision, but we also live in a democracy where people are allowed to change their minds as well. And I think that's a really important thing to highlight. And many people who voted for Brexit are now no longer alive. And many people who could not vote for Brexit are now able to because they're old enough to. That's a very important key statistic there. People change their minds over things over time. So nothing is set in stone. But absolutely there is space to have a veterinaries agreement. Is there space in terms of student mobility? Is there space to work closer together on issues? I think there absolutely is. And I think there would be a willingness in Europe to have those conversations in due course, should that be the wish of the British government. He added that Ireland would be an ally of a closer relationship between Britain and the EU. He said it is obviously important that Britain and the European Union continue to be good neighbours, and it is absolutely in Ireland's interest that we facilitate that in every way we can around any European table. Mr Reynolds said he welcomed Mr Harris's constructive attitude. Labour had campaigned during the election to respect Brexit and not to revisit those constitutional arguments, he said. But on trade, he added, "I think if we can sell more whiskey, more salmon to the market, which is so significant to us, of course we should explore an opportunity to do that. So we're not going to revisit those constitutional arguments, but of course, where there is mutual interest in both the European Union and UK to work together, that is a good faith. It has got to make sense. Yeah, it's got to make sense, guys. It's me. You know, there is indeed obviously something that can be made there, and it's just a case of a bit of common sense in the room now. You know, don't get me wrong. Obviously, the Conservative the last Conservative government, obviously Rishi Sunak ironing out the Windsor Framework deal, which I think was a very good deal in the interest of the people of Northern Ireland. But for the rest of the UK, who have struggled obviously since Brexit, more needs to be done. Obviously, especially trade is really hampering businesses, and it needs to reduce at least the red tape for businesses coming in and out of the UK, and we need to do it also for EU markets, obviously coming in and out of the UK as well. Those businesses that come into the UK, we need to make it just as much as easy for them as it does for us, because guess what it does? Grows the economy, because that's what we want. Everyone wants to hear that the economy growing. Everyone wants to see actions, not words. Well, this is one way of doing them. So trying to reduce the issues around the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson got for us, I think is within everyone's best interest. And the rhetoric and the talk that you have from the likes of Nigel Farage, from those hard Brexiteers, has not helped anyone in any way. Has not helped us. It's not helped the EU, and it's certainly not helped the UK and the British public in any way, shape, or form. But obviously, like I said, the first 100 days will be interesting to say the least. But what do you guys think? What do you guys make of Jonathan Reynolds' comments? What do you guys make of Keir Starmer's position? What do you make of the Irish PM's position of what they've said about Brexit? And what kind of Brexit renegotiations or review or key parts of Brexit that could be improved upon with this new relationship that the EU now has with a Labour government? Let me know your thoughts and more in the comments section down below. But if you found this video interesting, please hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video, and subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you could do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.